Good evening. Board President Walker is not able to join us this evening. We offer Spanish interpretive services with Jorge from Language Connection. If you need translation assistance in person, please check with Jorge for a device. Jorge, please translate this information.
Si alguien necesita de la ayuda de un intérprete, tenemos el sistema y los radios para hacerlo. Gracias.
Thank you. We provide live streaming for the meeting. The link can be found on our webpage under Board of Directors or by going directly to ysd7.org/board meetings. If you wish to make a public comment, there is two options available to you. The first option is for commenting on the agenda items only. The second option, which comes towards the end of the meeting, is for all other topics. In order to speak tonight, you will need to sign two forms, the sign-in form and the guidelines form. If you're interested in watching past meetings, you can find them on our web pages YSD YouTube channel. Barb, will you call roll, please?
Director Beckett,
Here.
Director Navarro Jr.,
Here. Oh,
Director Rice,
Here.
Vice President Villanueva,
Here.
and President Walker is excused.
Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Next, we'll have the land acknowledgement.
Today, the schools of the Yakima School District rest on the ancestral lands of the 14 confederated tribes and bands of the Yakima Nation.
Hoy las escuelas del Distrito Escolar de Yakima descansan en las tierras ancestrales de las 14 tribus y bandas confederadas de la nación Yakima.
The people of the Yakima Nation inhabited more than 12 million acres.
La gente de la nación Yakima habitó más de 10 billones de acres.
Across Adams, Benton, Chelan, Douglas, Franklin, Grant, Kittitas, Klickitat, and Yakima counties.
En los condados de Adams, Benton, Chelan, Douglas, Grant, Franklin, Kittitas, Klickitat, y Yakima.
Today, we honor those native peoples who are tied to the land through history, legends, and culture.
Hoy honramos a estos pueblos originales que están vinculados en la tierra a través de historias, leyendas y culturas.
We acknowledge the descendants who live in the world today.
Reconocemos a sus descendientes que viven en el mundo de hoy.
We thank the caretakers of this land who have lived here and continue to live here since time immemorial.
Agradezcamos a los guardianes de la tierra, quienes han vivido aquí y continúan viviendo aquí, desde tiempos inmemoriales.
An acknowledgement is a simple, powerful way to show respect.
Un reconocimiento es una manera simple y poderosa de mostrar respeto.
And a step toward correcting the stories and practices that erase indigenous peoples' history and culture.
Y un paso hacia la corrección de las historias y prácticas que borran la historia y la cultura de los pueblos indígenas.
It also honors the truth. También honra la verdad. As a school district, we will continue to build upon our relations with the Yakima Nation.
Como distrito escolar, continuaremos fortaleciendo nuestras relaciones con la nación Yakima.
Next on our agenda is a moment of silence to honor two of our Yakima School District family members. We'd like to honor the memories of Robert Dr. Bob Alexander and Leon Lee Morris. Links to the obituaries can be found on the public agenda. Please join me in a few moments of silence in honor of these family members. Thank you. Next, we have a report to the board, YEA addressing budget concerns. Francis Guerrero, YEA President, please.
Good evening. So I want to remind you, the last time I was here, I quoted Charles Blow. One doesn't have to operate with great malice to do great harm. The absence of empathy and understanding are sufficient. In fact, a man convinced of his virtue even in the midst of his vice is the worst kind of man. I have to tell you, this district burned its bridge with me 2 years ago to ashes. And that disrespect was groundless, faithless. There was no reasons for it, especially since this cabinet knew that I was the future president. And when I had to file my first grievance against the district, it struck me as more disrespect. It was a simple grievance that cost no money to grant, would have bought goodwill with me, would have bought goodwill with my members. But no, it was denied. And I'm going to take that to arbitration, and it's going to cost the district money. Second grievance, same thing, disrespect. That was for a band stipend that shouldn't even be an argument because this community passed a levy so that we could keep those music programs in place, not nickel and dime them. And then it felt like that disrespect was continuing over the summer as you were cutting my members in violation of the contract. But I thought maybe that was about desperate budget moves. Clearly there's been mismanagement, and this is just more evidence of it. And then last week came the ultimate insult when they tried to cut my members from Yakima Online in just blatant violation of the contract, like in multiple ways. And someone finally understood that today. But damage had already been done. People had already been moved. Word had already gone out to the community. Rumors were already all over Facebook. And this last-ditch effort to try and save, while I appreciate it and we made the compromise, the harm you have done to my members, it makes no sense. I get the disrespect to me, but to my members on that level, it's unforgivable. And if this compromise had not come today, let me tell you where my mind went this weekend. I was freaked out. I don't do this job by myself. I have all past 3 presidents on speed dial. I have all 4 UNICEF directors on speed dial. I'm getting help. I get advice, every single thing. And something HR said to me on Friday really triggered a light. The complete dismissiveness of the violations that they were making. So I consulted one of the past presidents and I told them something about this grievance, something about that grievance, and let them know I was probably on my 3rd grievance that was also going to go to arbitration. And there was a moment of quiet. And the president told me, in my entire presidency, I only took 2 cases to arbitration. I've been president for 5 minutes and I'm on my 3rd one. It's not funny. That disrespect and that harm that it has caused to my members is unforgivable, especially since we're in a budget crisis and the optics of what we do matters. Denying that second grievance does not inspire confidence in the leadership at these tables. We need to pass another levy in 4 years. And how are you going to do that when you've done nothing to inspire confidence? Your land acknowledgement literally says an acknowledgement is a start to correcting wrongs, and never has there been acknowledgement of responsibility here with this budget crisis. There's been a lot of victims of circumstance. It's more than that. It's actual budget mismanagement. And the continual desperate moves to try and fix that are causing irreparable harm, unnecessary harm. And again, let's go back to my crazy weekend when lights were turned off in my head Friday. I got no sleep this weekend because I kept thinking to myself, why would you do that? Why would you make all these messes with these grievances that are going to go to arbitration? And I get it, because you don't have to pay the consequences of that for a year. You can drag arbitration out and you won't pay the consequences of that for a year. So I could see cabinet, one of which is already set to retire, one of whom is probably very likely to retire, another one that doesn't even live here, and the fourth, what if we end up with this nice little budget surplus at the end of the year because we cut YOL and all the teachers and we look decent, and now we can all bail and let the district suffer the consequences the following year with new leadership? That was a crazy thought in my head. I don't think that anymore now because we fixed the situation yesterday, but wow, I can't be the only one who's thinking conspiracy theories like that. I can't be the only one who's got such a lack of confidence and faith in this district. And that shouldn't be the case. We need our community to trust us and to believe in us and to have faith in us. And none of these budget moves, none of these budget cuts do that. If we have to suffer for a couple of years, then so be it. But stop making cuts that cause irreparable harm to our people and to our community. Ultimately, they're the ones who are going to suffer. You're targeting the vulnerable communities. You're targeting SPED, you're targeting online, you're targeting the kids who don't really have a voice of their own and don't usually come from parents who will tend to be vocal. That is so wrong. I need you to ask some really hard questions of your cabinet and the way they are conducting business. Because today, some simple little thing happened, some simple little act of disrespect against one of my members, and I lost it. And I was probably meaner to HR than I needed to be, but I'm sick of it. I'm sick of the way we are being treated. And I'm telling you right now, if this is some kind of test, you want to see how far I'll go, how much I'll do, you don't need to test me. I will. I will go after every single little violation against my contract. I'm not tolerating any more mistreatment. It's not right. And it doesn't help this district at all. We need to start making positive relationships, not continuously burning bridges. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have updates from members of the board. Do we have any updates? Superintendent's update.
Thank you, President Villanueva, members of the board. I have just one item to surface this evening, and that has to do with a report that was released from the League of Education Voters this last week. You may be well aware that an article came out in the Yakima Herald this past week, Rising Costs for Washington School Districts Outpace State Funding, which does, of course, talk about this report. If we can move to the PowerPoint. I'd just like to take you through a couple of important items as identified through this report. By the way, this is compiled through Eric Corman, the CEO of the League of Education Voters. I may have referenced him a few weeks ago. He is one of the individuals working with an organization that is approaching the state around changes in the state funding model. And he had caught wind of the work that we were doing with the University of Washington and the similar work in approaching getting away from a resource-based funding model to a student funding model. Anyway, this report did come out, and what he references in the study itself was to investigate the financial challenges faced by districts all over our state. I did reach out to OSPI to find the exact number of districts that had declining enrollment this past year. The number was 141 school districts. So that's quite significant if you think about the number of districts in our state. The recommendations from the report, which were compiled based on intensive studies of 21 of those school districts, Yakima was not one of those districts, but they did find out through this sample size that the three recommendations were to align funding with K-12 goals, formalize school rules as far as mental health support that isn't adequately funded, and then to prevent further negative outcomes by ensuring that we have behavioral and mental health supports in place to avoid the prison to school to prison pipeline. The main findings, though, I would draw your attention to those 4 bullet points: the staffing and labor market challenges, system shortfalls, behavioral and mental health, and challenging student needs. I'd like to focus on the second bullet, which is the system shortfalls. They do identify that the K-12 funding formulas, including for special education and operating costs, are insufficient, and over-reliance on local levies does create inequities, particularly in poorer districts. And that is one of the things that we see in our valley, being the district that, or the county actually, that has the lowest voter turnout in the state, but also being a high poverty county as well, but high poverty district. So those local levies do really sap resources away from poorer districts that richer districts are not required really to utilize at the same levels. The theme across the top, you can see the rising costs for districts. It does identify that staffing costs have continued to increase, and they call out the number 19.7% just between 2019 and 2023. The graph that they do show, and you can see that the percentage increase in hired staff really focuses around areas of health and mental health. Nurse, social workers, counselor, and psychologist is actually down. May have to do with the challenge of finding psychologists across the state. But that gives you an idea of what it looked like, or looks like in our state overall around the focus of mental health and coming out of the pandemic. The second is the operating costs continue to rise, and they give you some data there, but I'll take you to the next slide, which is a great visual talking about general supplies, food, tech, supplies, utilities. You can see that natural gas is up 76%. And these are, this doesn't even count insurance, which is upwards of over $1 million in the last few years. So those do continue to increase these costs. And meanwhile, the state does not fund at the same level. In fact, I don't have this on the slide itself, but I do have a number here that I would like to share with you, since I am going down that route. And it has to do with the amount of state funding that we have seen decrease in the state since the McCleary Act. So you would think that that would continue to be a paramount duty, but it has dropped over 8% as far as funding, the way that the state now funds education. So we've seen a reduction in state funding across the last several years, from where it was in McCleary to now here we are in 2024. The funding disparities, especially rural districts, are relying on local levies. I did mention that. You can see that the way that state funds there on the bottom line, the state funding level, you can see that the state does not fund adequately as you look at the way that districts are funding beyond what the district funds. So when you're talking about paraeducators all the way to teachers, principals, custodians, office support, districts are funding more of that than what the state funded level allocates. And as you can see on this slide, over 60% of the districts that were involved in the study cited inadequate state funding for special education. And if we simply had full funding of special education in the Yakima School District, we would not have any of the challenges or theatrics that we've seen as of late. We would certainly be solvent in a big way, and we would be able to then be moving forward with a much clear direction regarding the funding challenges that we do have. The changing needs, we can see the number of languages spoken have increased. That's probably not applicable here, but we have seen an increase in some languages, but we do remain predominantly English and Spanish. But we have seen an increase as well in very small numbers, family here, a family there, in other languages. If you look at this almost last slide here that we have, maybe penultimate slide, the demographic shift shows that we have an increasing number of BIPOC students, which stands for Black, Indigenous, and People of Color, all the way to low-income families, almost at the 50th percentile, again, among the districts that were polled in this. And then lastly, we lose lots of teachers to larger districts, which tends to happen more with the rural districts, not so much with the urban. I don't know if you have any questions that I could answer, but I certainly wanted to surface that and share that in a wide opportunity here at this board meeting to let you know that the state is becoming more and more aware of what is happening with the funding model that is not sustainable. Do you have any questions?
Any questions from members of the board?
No questions, but just, well, actually, probably one question. If members of the community have questions about this presentation or funding issues as a whole, who in the district would they call?
They could reach out to certainly through our online and reach out through Let's Talk. They could make a call here to the main office, which would be redirected to somebody that could direct them to that response. If they have questions about this, certainly this is, you could access this through the Yakima Herald itself. It came out on the 15th of this month. We'll also have it on board docs, but I could share it widely as well. So anybody could certainly call me, and Jake and I could go ahead and connect and answer any further questions that somebody would have. So I appreciate you surfacing that.
Okay, thank you.
Right. And then the last item that I just shared with you is that, oh, sorry.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
It's not a question, but I'm just wondering, is there a paper or document that that I can read to get additional information to go a little bit more into the data? I'm sure there's a report.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. There is a report that was taken from the report. Do we have that attached or not at this point? We'll send it out to you
Okay,
and we'll
thank you.
make it accessible. So thank you.
It's probably also on the League of Education Voters website, since they're the authors of that report.
I'll have that sent to you before the end of the night. Okay. One more item. Okay. The last item that I have is just to announce that a couple of things. Today we had a great session in the morning with our elementary staff and in the afternoon with our secondary staff around inclusion, focusing on special education. It went phenomenally well. I don't know if Stacy would like to comment, but it was wonderful to see. I know you know Casey Mitchell. He's been in front of you several times in the last several months, but he and his staff did an outstanding job, and it was great to see the representation from YEA being present and speaking as well, along with several of our directors and executive directors. Anything to add, Stacy?
Thank you, Superintendent Green. No, it was just, it just was heartfelt that all of our, it was a general education meeting where we were doing Special Education 101 for all teachers. And we did a kickoff with special education teachers. Was that last week or earlier in the week? Our weeks are running together. That went really well also. Our new special education directors are doing just a phenomenal job of working and cooperating with each other and collaborating with all the teachers in the district. And we look forward to our collaborative work with the YEA committee around, we did Special Ed 101. Next time it'll be 201, 301. And as Franny Guerrero shared with teachers today, with the law changing in 2028, everybody needs to be up to speed as a teacher in what is required to serve students in our special education programs, as well as in general education classes and inclusion. So we're very excited about that work moving forward. And thanks, Franny, for your support today. Really appreciate it. We're excited about the new direction to come. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Stacy. And then lastly, we do have our opening kickoff day tomorrow. So from 8 to 9 a.m. at the Davis Auditorium, we'll have the elementary staff taking part in a program that has been prepared. And at from 11 to 12, we'll have the secondary staff present. And in between, there will be opportunities to engage vendors and services that are available, along with food trucks and things like that in the morning. So if anybody would like to attend, we'd love to have you. If you can make it, just simply let us know and we'll slot you in there. But thank you for your support as we start this opening day. And we're looking forward to having kids here relatively soon and the excitement of everybody coming back to school. Thank you.
Thank you. Next on the agenda is calendar updates and future agenda topics. And Kristen Fitterer will lead us through that.
Good evening. Wanted to bring your attention and the community's attention to back to school information that we have on our website. It's at ysd7.org/back to school. That contains our open house schedule, which is in full swing, even with 2 open houses today at Adams and Washington. So look for the full schedule there. There's information about our kindergarten nights and our 6th and 9th grade orientations. And as Dr. Green mentioned, we do have opening day for staff tomorrow, August 21st. And then, of course, our first day of school is Thursday, August 22nd. Since it's the beginning of our school year, I'd like to go over with the community a few of our specifications on our school board meeting schedule. So for the most part, our school board meets twice per month. When we have a Monday meeting, it's typically at 4 p.m. and our Tuesday business meetings are at 7 p.m. Those are held at Central Services. We do have school visits this year, and those rotate on a 3-year schedule. This year, we are visiting Garfield, Nob Hill, MLK Junior, McClure, Hoover, Wilson, Discovery Early Learning, YV Tech, and Washington Middle School. So that's throughout the school year with our school board meetings. And then our board does have 2 retreats that are slated for January 13th and August 11th, and those both start at 8:30 a.m.
Any questions about calendar updates? Okay, thank you. Next on the agenda is the monthly financial update. That's Jake Cooper.
Good evening, members of the board. Before you this evening is the first of 2 presentations. So later on will be the approval, or requested approval of the annual operating budget. Before you right now is just the monthly financial report for the month of June, the most recently closed fiscal month for the year. So again, items of interest, we talk about enrollment below projection, and we've addressed many times. And then also note, as we talked about last time, our clean federal financial and accountability audits for 23-24. Graphically speaking, as we talk about, I'd like to point you out to the enrollment changes from, excuse me, pardon. I already have the right hard copy page. The enrollment changes. Pointing to look at September of 1920 to September of 23-24. You can see that there's almost an 800 student decline in that period. We have in some of your materials, we often measure from 2017-18, which is the peak of our enrollment. So if that number varies for the crowd or community, just know that it's often a point in time difference, not that the numbers have changed. Again, our enrollment is stable as we move to the end of the year, and we have reached the last PT3 count, so these counts will not change going forward. General fund budget versus revenue, revenue versus actual comparisons. You can see the teal bar are the actuals and the black are the budgeted bars. The way our revenue flows, obviously, we talked about before, we are a reimbursement-based district and a lot of claims, so you can see sometimes our revenue trails. For the most part, our revenue is above projection in about half the months and below in the others. So we are waiting for July and August numbers to be finalized as we close out the fiscal year. Expenditures as well. There's general fund expenditures, budget versus actual. Same graphical setup on this scenario. The teal is the actual and the black bar are the budgeted. You can see some months, of course, we are above. There's a few months, but as we have been reducing expenditures and tightening up, we are more often than not in line with our budgeted projections, our budgeted expenditures for that month. Cash flow, this is where I'll slow down. And we talked about cash many times, and the green is the projected cash measured on a monthly basis. As you can see, the start of the school year, and then our spending habits here are a significant spend in September because we have a huge amount of accruals, and then the staff have a lot of optional days that come for payment, as well as our insurance payment. So there's historically between $7 and $9 million of accounts payable in the month of September. So it's a big cash draw. And you can see that's what happened just last September. And then we moved down and we talked about the low cash months. of June. So you can see June of this current year has just above, it's about $5 million at the lowest point. Again, that's about $2 or $3 million off projection, which we've discussed, which means our fund balance should end lower. But June is a low cash month, and that is necessitated, or that is graphically shown in that slide before you. So our cash flow flows just like most school districts in the state of Washington, two tax collection periods and then a trough in the middle. And then the way the state apportions the money, we are cash poor in June and July, and then we get the rest of our apportionment to round out the fiscal year. Are there any questions on your cash flow currently? This is the MSOX, Material Supplies and Operating Costs. We love our acronyms, of course. Used to be NERCs, non-employee related costs. They're now Material Supplies and Operating Costs, or MSOX. This trend of purchases can be volatile because it depends upon, for example, that September graph is significantly greater than budgeted, because that is where we had large curricular adoptions and big purchases last September. And you can see the supplies and material budgets then continue to drop as we kind of go into the spring and of course, if you all know, we put spending restrictions in for the last few months of the fiscal year, so we should see a drop off in those as your last few fiscal months close out. And then ESSER 3, there is a small amount of ESSER if it's fully encumbered and will be off the books by the end of the fiscal year. It has to be expended by September 30th per federal guidance. The remaining expenditure are the last drawdown of Discovery Early Learning, and those funds will be fully exhausted. So that is your monthly financial report. Of course, I will be back very shortly for a more detailed report on the proposed budget. Again, if there are any questions, I'd be happy to entertain them.
Any questions from members of the board?
Thank you.
Thank you. Next is our first opportunity for comments from the public on agenda items. Do we have any individuals who have signed up? As a reminder, the purpose of community input is for the board to listen to concerns of the community. The purpose of community input is for the board to listen to concerns of the community. Speakers will be treated in a respectful manner. The board does not engage in dialogue at this time or typically responds to items that are not on the agenda, and the audience is expected to give their attention to the speaker. We have Michelle Forrester from Yakima Online here to talk about Yakima Online budget cut. Is Michelle Forrester here?
My name is Michelle Forster. I'm a mother. Well, I have 10, but 2 left at home. One is a sophomore at Davis, and one is a junior at Davis, and one is a sophomore at Yakima Online. Our concern is that we received an email stating that Yakima Online was no longer going to be running. And everybody that I've called has given me a different story. Just a little bit of background. My daughter, who's at Yakima Online, has some severe health problems that all the way through 8th and 9th grade, she failed. When she started Yakima Online in the middle of the school year, she passed with all A's for every class because she was able to work around the health issues and still get her homework done. Without the Yakima Online school option, my daughter doesn't feel like she can do it. And with that, it crushes our dreams, her dreams, and I feel like it's a complete tragedy to think that the budgets that have been laid out for us are cutting these programs that are absolutely vital for this community. And I just want answers, and I want answers that are real. I don't want to be passed on to the next person. I don't want to hear, oh, it's fine, it's going to be open. We just did the open house. Well, I got the email after we got home from the open house. I just want answers. What is going to happen with my daughter and her education?
Hi, my name is Stacy Locke. I'm the deputy superintendent. I'm not sure where you got an email. Was it from the Yakima School District stating the program was closed?
It was a teacher
Okay,
for Yakima Online.
okay. That teacher is in error. The program is permanently closed. You'll be contacted this week about your daughter's schedule and who will be her teacher and what will be next and moving forward.
I understand that. One thing though, Yakima Online has 3 weeks to complete a class. One of the messages I received was it would be at minimum before they could get everything up and running 2 weeks. That's 2/3 of the time that they're allotted for a class. Each class is 0.5 of a credit, which in order for her to have enough credits to be able to graduate on time, any time that's missed is coming away from her education. What then?
Well, I'm not sure where you heard the 2 weeks from. Was it from the same teacher?
No, it was somebody from the school district.
Somebody from the school district?
Mm-hmm.
It's not going to be 2 weeks. Again, you'll be contacted this week and your daughter will have her classes and we'll be ready to roll on the first day of school.
First day of school is supposed to be Thursday though.
It is.
Okay. All right, I'm holding you guys to it.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. I also have Teresa Maldonado that signed up, but I don't have an agenda item. Is Teresa Maldonado here? What's the topic that you want to talk about? About the budget? Okay. Okay, please, yeah. Yeah, we're recording the meeting, so we want to make sure everyone can hear you.
Okay, I'm a parent that likes all kids to get education. I respect some of the teachers that are there to educate the kids. And when everybody started saying the levy's coming, can you please vote for it? Okay, I voted for it. But then after that, after the levy passed, I started seeing a lot of cutbacks. A lot of teachers, they're good teachers, are letting go. They're not going to other higher paying education schools. And some of the students are really affecting students because a lot of them don't want to come to school because there's so much teachers that they got used to are no longer. And then all these budget cuts after you guys asked for the parents to vote for the levy. I read the levy and it said that some of the taxes were going to rise up, and I read how much was going to go up. And I said, I'm willing to accept that tax raise is going to go on my property taxes as long as the financial goes to the teachers. And instead of I hear more cutbacks, I just heard some other teachers that were moved from one school to another. They're just gonna be working until the end of next year. So what's gonna happen to those teachers a lot of them that I know were students that I knew when they were in Epic Head Start, and I was the one that convinced them, go, finish your education. And it's letting me down that I encourage them. And you, as the board member, you're letting them down, because they listen to me. And I told them, be a teacher, change lives. But how are they going to change lives if you're cutting all the budgets, letting teachers, terminating teachers that really study because they wanted to touch a child, to make them, understand that with education, you can go far. And it's the same thing that I taught my kids, because I, as a child, was denied education by my parents, because my parents were those that said, education is no good. Just go out in the fields and work. Because a lot of these students that are not coming to school, people don't pay attention. But I include myself with those students because we are forced to work in the fields, and then those parents steal our money. But when we want to come to school, they don't buy us our supplies. And they tell us, well, you wasted the money. But a lot of the teachers don't understand that it's out of the control of the student. They really want to come to school, but with all these changes, I don't think so. And then if the levy comes around, I'm going to tell you ahead of time, I'm not voting for it. I'm denying it. So you guys need to start fixing what you guys messed up. No more laying off teachers. Keep what you got now and try to work your budget. No more cutting because you're cutting a lot of fundings because I remember so many fundings from years ago. They're no longer existing. And I was the one that was always, even though I was sick, I still dragged my kids to those presentations you guys had in school, even though I was sick, because I wanted them to see there were so many opportunities. But right now, with everything that you're doing,
Thank you. Next, we have Duff DeWitt speaking about the budget.
Good evening, Duff DeWitt, YEA. Over the past week, as we came back from another shortened summer break, teachers were met with a barrage of cuts, daily last-minute changes, and a completely chaotic start to the school year. We have veteran teachers with decades of experience that have been displaced and put in the unenviable position of a new job with only days to prepare for the school year. Many being forced to share rooms or teach on carts after putting in more than 20 years in the positions that they've been in previously. Hearing the continued excuses from the superintendent's office about how and why we are in these positions is getting old. There are 140 school districts with falling enrollment out of 295 districts in the state. Out of those 140 school districts with falling enrollment, we are in the minority of that group with a budget crisis happening like this. Of those 140 with enrollment issues and a budget crisis, we are in a minority of that group because we passed a levy. We don't have levy failures like they do in those districts. We passed our levy, yet we still have a budget crisis. Local accountability matters, humanity matters, empathy matters. Thank you.
Thank you. Next on the agenda is the consent agenda. The consent agenda enables the Board of Directors to efficiently deal with matters that have been delegated to the superintendent, but by law must be approved by the board. Items on the consent agenda are voted upon as one block and approved with one vote. Any board member has the right to remove any item from the consent agenda for separate discussion and actions. The consent agenda includes approval of minutes for July 2024 board meetings, notification of approval of warrants for July 2024, approval of personnel actions, approval of out-of-endorsement assignments, budget status reports for July 2024, interlocal agreement, CWU and EWU, interlocal agreement with ASU and YV Tech, interlocal agreement 2024-25 with Clover Park Technical College and YV Tech for college and the high school, approval to purchase grocery, cleaning, and paper supply purchase during the 2024-25 school year, approval to purchase produce during the 2024-25 school year, approval to purchase milk during the 2024-25 school year. I'll entertain motions.
Madam Chair, I do have a question.
Please.
The agreement with CW does have a name of a family member. Would I need to recuse myself from that vote? Or should we ask our legal expert?
I don't believe there's a conflict of interest to you.
Yeah, so on the CWU agreement, contract number 1, there is an office manager that I'm related.
It's not, oh, there it goes. I don't think you have a conflict. I think you could, if you chose to abstain, you could, but I don't think there's a legal conflict.
Okay.
You don't enjoy a pecuniary interest in the contract, so.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify that, just to make sure there's not an appearance of a conflict of interest. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or discussion?
I move that we adopt the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Barb, will you call the roll, please?
Director Beckett,
Aye.
Director Navarro Jr.,
Aye.
Director Rice,
Aye.
Vice President Villanueva.
Aye.
Motion passes 4-0.
Thank you. Next, we have Resolution 08.23.24, adopting the 2024-25 budget with Jay Cooper presenting.
Good evening, everybody. Members of the board, community. Before you tonight is the final budget adoption. So interestingly enough, this meeting usually for CFO is a celebratory one because all the work that comes together in building a budget this size takes 9-10 months to do. I told you there's a lot of firsts. This is not a celebratory budget adoption. It will be a budget adoption after a lot of work and heartache, obviously, we've been hearing about this evening. However, the budget, revised budget brought before you accomplished what was not accomplished in the preliminary budget that was brought to you in July. So the budget before you this evening will have a slight surplus. Again, and I'll point you to that as we start. So just to ground everybody on the board, the only changes before you this evening from the public hearing are in the general fund. And though the general fund now reflects additional reductions to staff and also materials, supplies, and operating costs, or MSOCs, as we talked about earlier. So the main change, of course, is the decrease in expenditure. So the prior budget brought before you in a preliminary fashion had a deficit, and it put us in a deficit position. The prior ending fund balance was just under 4.7 million, and you can see now the ending fund balance is projected at just under 8.5 million. So going from a 1.6% total reserve up to a 3% reserve is a positive change and does provide us additional funds and for cash flow and being able to meet our obligations month to month. So just, it's going to be not a full presentation as last meeting because I just want to focus on the changes predominantly. So increased and fund balance, no more deficit position, and a slight surplus budget. That was accomplished by the reduction in force that was approved by the board of directors, attrition in some cases, and then the admin furloughs and suspension of vacation cash out, and then reduction in some areas of material supplies and operating costs lead you to a balanced budget with a slight surplus. This slide, of course, we've talked about the district's staffing levels, and what Superintendent Green, or in that League of Education Voters report, I don't know if it was in the slides, it does show that we were not alone when we added staff during the pandemic, and as districts continue to reduce down as we find ourselves. So the slide, of course, has changed over time. 11.42% is still the projected enrollment decline. However, those numbers on the CERT staffing increase and the classified staffing increase continue to drop. If you recall, when we first started this, those were at 17.5% and 11% respectively of an increase. So we have made significant changes to the staffing levels given our current revenue. To that end, you can see the budget comparisons there. That is the staffing comparisons from one year to the next, and staffing FTE is down 9.4% from one fiscal period to another. This was, of course, needed as we faced a $20 million reduction in the spring, and as was brought to you earlier in June and July, the sobering fact that we continue to outpace our budget in certain areas of the district, and we're going to end our fund balance not at 11, but closer to 8 million. But again, we have made significant staffing reductions, both through attrition and also through reduction of force that were done in this board chamber. I did want to take some time on this. I apologize for the size of the slide. Again, for those of you who want to go in more detail, all these documents are attached to board docs and can be accessed at any time. But I do want to talk about our administrative overhead because it does keep coming up. And I'd like to point out on the chart, if you'd like, the chart before you shows three years of data. The first is the column is the actual state expenditures and as a percentage in overhead for 2022-23. And then the middle column is the actual for Yakima, and the final column is the budget before you this evening for adoption. So the left-hand column is 22-23. You're like, well, Mr. Cooper, that's old. Well, not really. That is the most recently completed fiscal year by the entire state of Washington. We still have not completed the 2023-24 fiscal year. So that is the most current statewide data available from a financial standpoint. The statewide overhead, which is admin or admin overhead as it's called, was 12.47% in the most recently completed fiscal year. Our district budget and close to actual this fiscal year is just under 11.5%, right at 11.5%. And then as we've continued to reduce administration, the proposed budget before you was just under 10.2. So at that point in time, we would be 2.2% below the current state average and significantly below all of the districts in Yakima County. So I do want folks to know that I have been through my entire career made it a goal and a quest to keep overhead down. I did that in my prior district for many, many years because I think a lean overhead is important because it also sends a signal that we are investing in the classroom more than anywhere else. Now, it's not always easily accomplished. I have often said that I have thin overhead, but I'm not thin. So it does require a lot of work for those that are doing, are at the top or any part in the organization. But I do want to point out, if you look at the overhead figures, we are considerably lower than the state. And if you'd like to go activity by activity, so the state requires you to code things a certain way, you can look exactly how much our board of directors is spending compared to the state, how much the business office is at versus the state, and et cetera, and so on and so forth. So if you want to do a deep dive, that's there for you. But I did want to get this data on the record because it has been bandied about in several forms and fashions. So that's your current administrative overhead. Again, the district will continue to reduce that as much as possible. But we still have to continue to execute our legal and fiduciary responsibilities, which does require some personnel. The fund balance trend. So I talked about the 1.6%. You can see now that the fund balance after the reductions were made in the surplus budget, you're closer to that 3% mark, which is a much better place to be than 1.6%. Of course, our goal is throughout the fiscal year to continue to tighten up expenditures and grow that cash balance so that we can end the fiscal year in a position where we can stand on our own 2 feet for September cash in September of 2025. This disclosure, we've gone through this. I had to update it because we did change the numbers. However, the disclosure is required by the state. What it does is it shows the MSOC funding, $20.5 million, and then actually how much we spend, just under 32 million. So the district is spending nearly 11.5 million in material supplies and operating costs above the state allocation. Questions? So that was an abbreviated and updated slide deck from the more lengthy preliminary budget presentation provided to you earlier. We have received some public input or comments on the budget itself. I have not received any directly in my office, but we did receive them through our social media channels. So again, at this point in time, I would recommend adoption of the budget before you, as the spending plan is no longer in a deficit position and moves us forward on a much more solid footing than the prior budget. And I'm happy to entertain any questions at this point in time.
Any questions from members of the board?
Just a comment. I appreciate the work that you and your staff and the senior administration and as a whole have gone to move us from a deficit budget to a balanced budget or slightly plus budget. I think it's important to maintain a fiscal balance in our financial situation, and I know that it's been a lot of really hard work and difficult decisions to get us to this point. I appreciate the work. Thank you.
Director Rice.
Any other questions from members of the board?
I don't have a question, but I'd like to request, Madam Chair, that I be recused from this participating in this vote due to having family members that could be impacted by this and to avoid the appearance of a conflict.
Any other questions or comments? I have a couple questions. You said that there were some input to the budget during the last month or so. Is there somebody who can give us a summary of what those suggestions or ideas were or input was?
Potentially, they were scattered around Parent Square, Sprout. Yeah. So I would have to get a compilation. I would say the most common theme was not to execute the reductions. There was not a lot of, there were not, besides cut administration, there was not a significant amount of other suggestions provided in the commentary, at least that I reviewed, which is not uncommon during budget reductions. So we can look at compiling those for the board if you would like. And is that something you would want to continue?
If that summary is representative of the comments, I'm comfortable with that.
I will see what we can track down.
Thank you. My other question question is, at our board retreat a couple of weeks ago, we met with 10 different administrative departments and reviewed a number of initiatives that were underway to reduce cost. Can you please summarize that work? And do we have a total number from those administrative departments, the overall budget savings that were realized?
Well, some of the work that they were describing had already taken place, and some of the work was aspirational. So when some of the departments were talking to you, they were talking about what is going to go into place and save money, and other things have already been executed. So to that end, I think if we start, for example, we are looking at streamlining our supplemental contract process, because we often don't have great oversight or timely oversight in that. So that was one cost savings. We also had talked about in transportation. I'm going to let them share because they give the details.
In transportation, when we do not, our primary function is to bring students to school and then take them back home again. We also do the transportation for sports and activities. When we run short on drivers, we then have to contract out the transportation services to a private contractor, which typically run 50% or more higher in cost. We use a track event that goes to Stillicum for an event that requires an overnight. When we use the subcontractor, it comes out to just shy of $4,000. When we do the work ourselves, it comes out to $1,950. So our priority is that when there are classified employees displaced, to use those displaced employees in transportation in order to train them, get them a different skill set, utilize them, and then protect the work by doing it ourselves, which also reduces costs, gives other opportunities to employees, and then that reduced cost, although it is billed to a sports budget, that too is what comes out of levy dollars. we believe we can drastically reduce the cost of subcontracting, which then goes back to the basic education budget. So that is one aspect. I'd like to thank our transportation director for working with us to try to figure those moves out. The other aspect on the maintenance side is to change the work that we're doing to something that is more cost effective and also needs to be done. So this year you will probably see us painting more than working on mechanical issues. We also have to make sure that we have enough of that MSOC set aside so that when we do have a mechanical breakdown that we're able to repair it. A mechanical breakdown took place to our HVAC unit about 2 weeks ago at MLK, and our department is responsible for repairing that work ourselves. So those are some aspects of what we are doing operationally. In the past, I personally am very critical of somebody setting aside money to spend on, say, maintenance and then not spending it. But under this set of circumstances, we will do everything we can to keep everything in reserves as possible and return back to the basic education budget.
I want to bring us back to, I think the question you asked originally was having a number from those 10 different departments. So that is not lost on me. And I think that the session that we had, the board retreat, was a wonderful opportunity in which we heard from multiple departments around the savings that were either aspirational or actually in effect or had already taken place. I would request, not that I need a direction for you to give me direction, but if you don't give me direction, I will still have our 10 presenters, I think coming back in January at our next board retreat to report out on the cost savings. Would be a wonderful way to kind of be able to monitor and see what the impact is of the controls that have been put in place and have definitive numbers for you at that time, if that would be acceptable.
That would be, I think it would be helpful, certainly for the community to understand the anticipated savings through that work, particularly as we're looking at a balanced budget, which does also include a reduction in staff, and that certainly is challenging for the community as a whole. So I think it would be helpful to show the work that the administrative departments have done to streamline and define cost savings within their budgets.
I can get you an estimate much quicker, but I still would also then move forward with the January idea. I think that would be wonderful to have those actual numbers for you. So I'll do both.
Thank you.
Yep.
Superintendent, if I may, one thing that I do want the community and staff to know is sometimes there is some frustration when you start a new school year about services and goods being there in a timely fashion. We are working our most diligently to make that happen. We still have supply chain and order issues, but I did want people to know that we are right now renegotiating lots and lots of vendor contracts. And so for curriculum, all the supports we have for interventions, et cetera, we have a huge amount of vendors and a large spend on ongoing services and tech that we are working through to renegotiate and save the district quite a bit amount of money. Sometimes that negotiations can take longer than anticipated. So I know sometimes I heard the frustration, which we acknowledge, but I want to let you know that we are working to renegotiate contracts to save the district a significant amount of funds. So it's a difficult balance. We're not focused on our cutting staff. We're focused on driving the best value for Yakima taxpayers from vendors. Now that ESSER has sunsetted, it's a great time to go back to vendors because a lot of vendors had a huge amount of K-12 business when ESSER was in place. And so now is a good time to go back and renegotiate those contracts. And that's what we're doing. So I did want to get on the record. That is one of our major focuses outside of our budget work is cabinet and tech and teaching and learning and myself. We are working to renegotiate and leverage our vendors, given our financial situation and the fact that it's a good time to renegotiate. So I just wanted to get on the record tonight because it is a rather important piece of our work.
We'll just add that certainly the work of looking at budget details and looking at school finance and trying to understand how all of the pieces come together and how student enrollment comes into play. And ultimately the fact that budget reductions are required to balance the budget and to keep the district in a place where we can continue to operate in the best way we can. The decisions to reduce staff don't come lightly to the board of directors. Certainly speak for myself as an individual board member, but also know that in our meetings when we deep dive into these discussions, these are very challenging discussions and decisions that we don't take lightly. Certainly, frankly, feel bad that we're in this position and need to make decisions to ensure that the district has solvency as we move forward. And hope that this should be the last year of budget reductions the way that we've seen them, and move forward into budget surplus where we wouldn't have to be making these kinds of decisions again. So with that, I'll entertain a motion.
I move that the board adopts the 2024-25 budget as presented.
Second.
We have motion and second. Any further discussion? Barb, will you call the roll, please?
Director Beckett,
Aye.
Director Navarro Jr. Abstain. Okay.
Yeah.
Director Rice,
Aye.
Vice President Villanueva.
Aye.
Motion passes 3-1.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Next on the budget is approval of resolution 09.23.24, authorized signatory with Jake Cooper presenting.
So before you this evening will be a pair of annual resolutions that need to be updated. The first before you this evening is, and you said the authorized signatory is the first one, correct?
Yes.
Is annually the board must update who is an authorized signatory for the school district, which means who can bind the school district to a contract in effect. And so those names are listed throughout the resolution and are explicitly provided to you for action this evening. Of course, we would recommend adoption because we do need to continue to sign things next year in an authorized fashion. So it is something that is required, and it's also very important for a governing body and an organization this size to do this work annually to make sure that those individuals who they entrust to contract and bind the district are those that are explicitly provided. So if there are any questions, I'd be happy to entertain them.
Are there any questions from members of the board? Am I missing, I do have a question. I don't see the resolution in board docs. Am I missing it? Oh, scroll down. Thank you. Well, any questions? No. I'll entertain a motion.
I move that the board approve resolution 09.23.24, authorized signatory as presented.
Second.
We have a motion and second. Barb, will you call the roll, please? Any other questions?
Director Beckett,
Aye.
Director Navarro Jr.
Aye.
Director Rice,
Aye.
Vice President Villanueva.
Aye.
Motion passes 4-0.
Thank you. Next, we have resolution 10.23.24, designation of auditing and investment officers. Jake.
Yes, members of the board and community, this is required resolution by the Yakima County Treasurer. This provides explicit names on who can invest or who has the authority to invest cash on the district behalf. Also denotes who can sign warrants and perform business office functions generally. So you will note in there, it's myself and my 3 administrators that oversee the business office who have signatory authority. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Or not signatory authority, investment authority.
Are there any questions? Nope, I will entertain a motion.
I move that the board adopt resolution 10.23.24, designation of auditing and investment officers as presented.
We have a motion. Do you have a second?
Second.
Any additional questions? Barb, will you call the roll, please?
Director Beckett,
Aye.
Director Navarro Jr.,
Aye.
Director Rice,
Aye.
Vice President Villanueva.
Aye.
Motion passes 4-0.
Thank you. Next, we have approval to dispose of surplus property throughout the 2024-25 school year. And Anthony Murieta presenting.
Is it okay to present from here, or you want me to go to the mic?
Sure.
Typically, I give you a summary, but this is a very short resolution, so I will just read you the document. The requested action is to approve the disposal of surplus property throughout the 24-25 school year. The requested action is that the Board of Directors declares equipment, supplies, furniture, and other district property obsolete and or surplus through the 2024-2025 school year, and these items be surplus through the most advantageous process to the district. This does not line in particular with any part of the strategic plan. The impact is at no cost, and simplistically put, the background information is RCW 28A.335.180 authorizes the board to declare equipment, supplies, furniture, and other district property obsolete and or surplus. So we will use the most cost-effective means available to us. I'll take any questions.
Any questions from members of the board? All right, I will entertain a motion.
Thank you.
Move to approve the authorization of disposal of surplus property for the 2024-2025 school year.
Second.
A motion and second. Any additional discussion or questions? Barb, will you call the roll, please?
Director Beckett,
Aye.
Director Navarro Jr., Director Rice,
Aye.
Vice President Villanueva.
Aye.
Motion passes 4-0.
Thank you. We've arrived at the second opportunity for comments from the public on all other items. Well, Kristen goes back to see if we have additional individuals who have signed up. We do have Steve McKenna here to talk about the budget.
I'm Steve McKenna. I'm former YEA president, I am a retired teacher, and I like to look at the Yakima School District budget. Some of my viewpoints are a little bit different than Mr. Cooper's, but anyway. I know we're in a financial calamity that's also creating some personal calamities for a lot of people. I would hope that our goal is to prevent another massive rift in the spring. I would suggest that the school board direct the superintendent to adopt a budget that staffs the central office with only the state allocation number of administrators in the central office. That would save the Yakima School District over $4 million by itself, which is more than the $3.5 million that the district is saving by cutting classified personnel in October. Those areas could be cut with no impact on school buildings that have students in them. Another area of concern that I have is that previously the proposed budget had listed 15,247 projected students in the Yakima School District. Well, we ended the school year with 14,770. That means we're projecting 447 more students than we ended last year with. I don't know how you came up with the number since we've been declining every year for the last 5 years. I wouldn't think the number would increase. But my concern is that since we put that number down and we get paid for that up front from the state, but then we're going to have to, it may cause you problems down the road here. By getting the front-loaded money, when your state allocation is cut severely in the spring, if those students don't materialize, this could cause even more employees to be riffed in the spring if those additional 447 students do not appear. I do remember a Superintendent Demian that did something similar by inflating the student numbers that ended up causing a major financial crisis in the Yakima School District. That was his last year. He left on the cutting edge, according to quote the budget, the YSD board at the time. Another area of concern I have is the $740,000 that we spend on public relations. I'm sure that could be cut drastically. The board of directors spends over $320,000 on purchase services. And as far as comparison of administrators, I will just tell you that our superintendent's office budget total, which includes all personnel, is $2,214,667.22. Only 3 districts in the state spend less. As far as the superintendent's office budget per pupil, we spend $142.08 per student for that budget. Pasco, with more students than Yakima, spends $564,946 for their superintendent's office. Kennewick spends $495,938 for their office of superintendent's office. For Kennewick, that's $26.31 per student, and in Pasco, that's $30.86. I will be sending you these stats once I get home. I didn't have enough ink in my printer to print these OSPI forms off. But when you start comparing administration, very small districts can skew the average. But when you look at the top 30 districts in the state, we are very top heavy in a lot of areas. And I will continue to bring this information to you from the OSPI website. This is not something I'm making up. This is stuff that I get off of OSPI's website. I suggest that some of you might want to spend some more time in some of those areas. Thank you.
I think I understand we don't have any new individuals who've signed up to speak. Is that right? That's thumbs up and not one, right? Okay. That brings us to the end of our agenda. Do we have a need for executive session?
We do not.
Okay. Any other comments for the good of the order? Thank you. Meeting adjourned.